All right, now we're live. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Superlative Podcast, episode 14. I'm your host, Edward Bushi. Every episode, one guest, a founder, investor, operator, or someone who's competed at a level most people only read about. We get into the real story, what shaped them, what they learned the hard way, and where they think the world is going next. No edits, no post production, just one sharp conversation. So, I'm very, very happy to introduce Justin Oberman from Oberman Partners. Justin believes you don't get to decide what your brand is. All you get to decide is what you're going to do to get attention. So before we get into your story, Justin, could you give us two sentences about what you're building with the Oberman Partners?
What I'm building with Oberman Partners. Sure. Uh, Two sentences. Mm. Well, I guess the two sentences are you don't need to build a personal brand. You need to master the art of personal publicity. So it's
Hmm.
helping founders, executives, um, as well as celebrities getting into the business world, so to speak, um, do what actually really needs to be done in order to build a personal brand. I'm not anti-personal brand. I'm not saying you don't need. I'm just. It's more. Um, yeah. I mean, that's basically it. Because I believe that you need to use personal publicity or self publicity in order to build the personal brand.
That there's a lot of nuance there. I'd love to dive deeper into it. But like before that, I'd like to get a little bit of backstory to start it off. So you describe what you do as a publicist, ghostwriter, and personal brand manager, all in the same sentence. How do you end up with that specific overlap? People just pick one.
Well, a lot of that is putting those terms there for SEO purposes, so people can find
Mm,
me for the various things that they're looking for, and then they meet me and they talk to me and they realize that I'm a little bit more. If they're coming at me for a ghostwriting, yeah, sure, ghostwriting is a major part of what we do as a publicist. Um, but it is for sure not the only thing. And even when we do ghostwriting, we don't do it in the way that most people do it, where we're just writing things you're never seeing it. It's a collaborative process, and
yeah.
so that's why those three things are there. I'm landing more and more on just calling myself a publicist or a personal publicist,
Mm,
because it kind of just forces me to own up to the name, and deliver what it is that they do. I would just say that the difference between me and um, and what most people would think about when they think about the word publicist is I'm not a
mm,
publicist like in the typical PR sense. I'm not um, uh, throwing out doing outreach right to reporters
mm,
and stuff like that. Although I do have relationships with them, I the best way to think about it is more of the old school style publicity, the old Hollywood style, where my goal is to create news, is to turn my clients into news and have them do things that are making the news. And so that the reporters are just sort of coming to them. The way I put it a lot of times is you can go out into the net, so you can go out into the world with a net to catch butterflies. But if you really want to do that, the smarter thing to do would be to build a garden with the right type of flowers to attract the right type of butterflies so that you're just sitting there
environment.
catching them. And this is not to say that the outward going stuff is not important either. It is. Um, it's just that this is my approach.
Okay, that's a really interesting approach. That you don't. It's not a typical publicist kind of route. It's more like if I'm characterizing it correctly, like old school like Hollywood style, I- so to speak. One of the things that I've noticed in our call, our onboarding call earlier, was that you choose really good particular clients, clients with like really good interest. From your point of view, what does a story have to have for you to be like, yeah, this is something you could work with?
That's a it's a really good point. So when a client comes, when someone's like, oh hey, I got your information from so and so, or whatever, or I want to talk to you about, doing ghostwriting for me or this or that. I explain, what I do, like how it's more than just ghostwriting and stuff like that. I
Mhm.
give my prices right away, just as a litmus test. If that scares you, then you won't work with me. But then I also make it very, very clear that this is not it's not it, it's not a sales call. It's an audition.
Mhm.
You're
Mhm.
auditioning for because I can't just work with anybody. I mean, there's some people who are very good at turning nobody's into something or stuff like that. But um, uh, um, my skill set is more just in saying, okay, yeah, no, you have what it takes, both
Mhm.
mentally, physically, whatever, in order to do what is going to be needed to be done in order to achieve what it is that you're wanting to achieve. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, it's a combination of physical appearance, it's a
Mm.
combination of attitude, way that you're thinking, the way that you think. It's a energy, what kind of energy you have,
Yeah.
and also and your story. And sometimes certain things are higher than others, and sometimes, hey, if all you need is the energy and the good looks and the way you present yourself, and we can or your story is really good, you see. But even if you have an incredible story, it's going to be really hard to do that if you don't have the other things. But sometimes the
Mhm.
story is so damn good that we
Yeah.
can that we can work with that. So it's very much an addition, and I can pretty much tell within 30 seconds to a minute of talking to somebody whether or not I'll be able to help them, and I will end the call quick. I'll be, blah blah blah. There's one question that I like to ask at the about at the 1 minute mark. Um,
Yeah.
I ask the question. I'm not going to say what it is because I don't want people to.
Oh,
You could rehearse for it and answer it correctly. I'm not going to tell people what it is because I want
of
that. It's
course.
good, best for everybody. Depending on how they
Good for
answer that
surprise.
question, yeah, depending on how they answer that question, I know immediately. It will. If I already have a hunch, it will. And then I'll be like, "Well, thank you very much. It's very interesting. I'm sorry that I just don't think I'm actually going to be able to help you here, but
Mhm.
I do have a bunch of people that you should speak to. Because I never like to leave anyone off the hook, right? I know a lot
No,
of
that's fair. Yeah.
ghostwriters. I know, yeah. So, yeah.
And I kind of understand that point because like doing the work you do like is in itself like an investment, right? Because you're gonna to need to spend time with that person, really get to know their story and get their rhythm, and then help them build their. I want to ask about the kinds of people that you work with, right? Like you're clearly wired really differently, right? Like from the executives you work with, you're working with operators of companies, right? That's pretty interesting. Like you're the person who shapes how the world sees them. Like when did you first realize that that was the work that you want to do? Like you wanted to like work with these kinds of people.
If you had told me I'm doing now, what, 5, 6, 7 years ago, I would have
Yeah.
laughed at you. I come from the advertising world, right? Ad agencies, pre digital. Like when I started working in ad agencies, we were still the main thing was TV commercials, print ads, outdoor. Like I got sort of the tail end of that, and so
Yeah.
I worked in advertising also while everything changed, and maintained being an ad guy through all of it. And basically, what happened is that well, there's so many interesting stories in
Mhm.
term like basically how I got divorced from my wife, and then I used advertising and marketing strategies to rebrand myself in order to win her back. Wrote a LinkedIn post about that the other day.
Whoa.
And yeah, and then but I didn't call it personal branding. I was just like using what I knew how to do. And then we got remarried. I was remarried, and then a couple years later, COVID happened, and I was working in house at an agency at the time, and the two clients I was working with just stopped, and so I lost my job along with a lot of other people. And my wife said to me, "You are either going to start your own ad agency or you are going to find something else to do." So I didn't know I got into advertising because I suck at everything else, and so I didn't know what else to do. So I got into it that way, and so I said, okay, fine. So I started an ad agency, Oberman and
Mm.
Partners, right? And because it was COVID, I couldn't network. I couldn't. There was nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. And
Yeah.
so I just start, and I have all these like ad books, and so like I'm sitting there, I got time, I'm reading it, and I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Let me share that. Right? Let me share this
Mm.
thought. Let me share this. So I just started like basically writing about copywriting and advertising, and then engaging with people. And I wasn't even thinking about it in terms of like growth or
Engaging
anything. I
people
was
how? Like online?
I think
Like
people
what?
were
How do
writing
you?
back. People were writing back. People were liking. I wasn't like counting likes or stuff like that. I was literally just happy to share information and meet. I was meeting people like on LinkedIn, and I think it was because COVID and so many people were on there, and it was just so active. And at some point, somebody said, "Hey, Justin, you know you have like 15,000 followers on LinkedIn." And I'm like, I didn't even know that you could have followers. I thought it was just connections. And I'm like, oh, is that a lot? And they're like, yeah. And
Yeah.
what
Wow.
also was happening was people were DMing me and saying, I really like the way you think. Can you help me with this project? Can you help me with that project? They're like, because a lot of
Mhm.
people were losing their jobs and starting it. And my $500 jobs, $1,000 jobs with this, that, and whatever thing, until eventually from it, I uh, sort of became a LinkedIn influencer, and I was able to get my ad agency. You know, I had 5 employees, and I had got it up to 7 figures.
Mhm.
And then things kind of changed again. It was like right before AI think like the I don't know what happened, and I just got really burnt out because like I'm a creative, I'm not a business person, and I just like dealing with clients and all this stuff. I just burnt out, and I and I
What?
I
Even
just
though you
made it.
were successful with the
Yeah,
agency, you
yeah,
like
yeah.
felt.
I didn't. I did like I we had a client. We did a campaign, and
Yeah.
it it I'm not afraid to say this. It bombed so bad that the marketing team was right. And I was like, I can't, like, maybe I'm too old now. Maybe everything's changed and this and that. And it wasn't that I didn't think that I could adapt. It was like whether I cared enough to adapt.
Hmm. Yeah.
And it's not like I have no like, oh, back in my day, advertising was great. It was nothing to do with that. It was just like, I guess I could run it and just have people under me doing it or whatever. But I don't know. And what happened is
Yeah. The
that
world's changed. Yeah.
during that time, people were writing me, ad agency owners, and hey, can you help me do what you're doing for yourself on LinkedIn? And I was like, no, I'm not a ghostwriter. I'm not a. First of all, I'm not gonna help my competition. Second of all, like I'm not a. That's not what I do. Like I never wrote about LinkedIn when I was doing it. I was always writing about advertising this and maybe every once in a while, but it was I so I um what happened is that when I shut everything down and stopped taking ad work,
Hmm.
I remember reading a thing that's like, oh, LinkedIn ghostwriters are making $700 an hour, and I'm like, oh, okay, it's profitable. I need to make money somehow. So I didn't stop my strategy. I kept writing about advertising and marketing. And at the bottom of
Hmm.
the post, I would just say, hey, if you're still reading this and you like my post and you've been following me for a while, I'm
Oh no. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a glitch going on. We'll try and see if we can figure it out. Man, this we're getting so much good insights that the internet can't take it. Hold on, folks. I'm going to add a. Hey, Justin, you're back. You glitched out for a
back.
bit.
Okay, great. Yeah,
Yeah.
no. So we so I and then people sort of signed up, and
Hmm.
two of my first clients that way are still with me today, and I was just ghostwriting for people,
Hmm.
mostly in the advertising and marketing space in the beginning, and then it sort of began to branch out. um, and and then I began to realize, well, through my clients, that like, hey, you know what you're doing is a lot more than just what you're doing is a lot more than just ghostwriting, right? And the advice that you're giving and stuff like that, personal brand management, this and that. And so then I just started to evolve into that.
Mm.
And what I kind of realized was that what people were doing is they were taking their, they were like looking at like, I need to build a personal brand.
Yeah.
And they were taking misconceptions about how brands were built in regular advertising and marketing and applying it to like their own brand. I'm like, oh no, that's not how brands are built at all. I mean, I understand like that's what people think it is and stuff like that, but like that's not really how it's done. And then I realized, well, I can help in that way too. And I realized, so I mean, basically it comes down to like in regular marketing and advertising, brands are built in three ways. They're built with amazing service or an amazing product or amazing advertising. Right? Always about doing stuff. It's about doing stuff in public, right? It's about what you actually do. It's not going to a branding agency. If you look at all the great brands that have ever existed, Apple, Nike, none of them went to a branding agency and said, well, you got to do this, blah, blah, blah. It was just, they just started doing things, right? The advertising made Nike's brand, not a branding agency. No one, Apple, the advertising and Steve Jobs. And I mean, the way he named Apple, because he needed to give a name so that they could have a bank account. He's like, why don't we call it Apple? That's how brands are made. And for people, I mean, brands spend billions and billions and billions of dollars in order to not come across as a person. And then you have all of these people.
That's the wrong way to think about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you have these people who are trying to become brands. What the hell's wrong with you? You're a person. You have what the big brands want already. So it's really, and there, don't get me wrong, there is an aspect when you reach a certain level where you become a brand, right? But very few of us are at that level.
Are you saying about from a person point of view or like
from a personal point of view? Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
Right.
Okay,
you have brands spend billions of dollars to not come across as a brand. Yeah. And then you have people who are like, I want to be a personal brand. I'm like, why? Right? The brands don't want to be brands. Why do you want to be a brand? And I said, don't get me wrong. There comes a certain time, a certain level of fame where you have a brand, but usually that's not in your control, right? Like that it is, and it's curated by your publicist and by your manager and by your this or that. But very few people are there. So what you need to do in the meantime, where brands say, okay, I'm going to do great advertising, great service, what a person needs to do is, a person could actually use paid advertising to create their personal brand. But the better way of doing it is publicity, right? Personal publicity, right? And there are people who are really, really good at personal publicity, right? Salvador Dali, Andy Warhol. Like you look at these people, right? And you say, what are they doing? They knew how to put on a show. They knew how to stand out. They knew how they weren't afraid to do those things. And that is to a certain extent what you need to do to build a personal brand. And maybe 1/5 of that should happen online. Yeah. Actually, social media is a horrible place.
Okay.
Social media is a horrible place to build a personal brand. And to rely on, I need to build a personal brand, so I'm going to start posting online. Very few people are able to do that. And it's like a rarity. And usually it's because what they're doing is they're using the platform in a wildly different way, right? So again, it's more about what they're doing than it is the fact that they're using LinkedIn and having some sort of formula, right? I'll just say one more thing. When you think about what the goal is, what the goal of social media is, it really should be not you posting things. It should be you're doing things and everyone's talking about you. That's the goal. The goal should be like, I don't even have an account. And people are just talking about me all. Warren Buffett, people talk about him all day, right? Like that's the goal. That's the goal.
Yeah, that's
You
not
know,
intuitive, That's not
that's not
intuitive.
intuitive.
Like
No.
yeah, people think posting is the game, but it's the you're saying, if I'm repeating it back, is the act of doing something and people talking about it. Posting is just a one little area of it, but most of the thing, you're doing it in real life and people are talking
Yeah.
about you. That's publicity. That's what you're saying.
In the beginning, you might have to be a little bit self-promoting. You might have to post
Mm,
things about yourself and stuff like that. But if you go to most of the people who like you really admire and you look at their accounts and you start scrolling down, you'll notice
uh,
that most of the posts are like pictures of them doing things about things that they've done. Even their posts
mm,
are like wrapped up in stories about things. It's never just like pontificating things and advice like out there in the
yeah,
universe. And it, even if that's what they're doing it differently. They're doing it dressed up like a
yeah.
vampire. I don't know. Like the point is they're doing it differently. And there's just so many ways to go about this.
Hmm. So I'm imagining, you're working with executives and your clients. Some of them are like they've spent years thinking the about their brand and carefully crafting it, and then you come in with new insight. How do they react to this? If you don't mind me asking.
Um, well, most of them haven't been sitting there crafting or thinking about their brand. Most of them have like
Mm,
just come to the realization, like in today's economy, personal branding is a buzzword. They see the benefits that it's having for other people. Um,
mm,
but they do come into it with a sort of misconception, right? It's like, okay, well, before we start, I need to craft. So like that's an end conversation for me. If I meet with somebody and they're like, I just wanted to talk to you first. I'm actually meeting with somebody. I'm actually going to be hiring somebody first, and we're going to be um, doing a like little workshop thing about my personal brand. And I tell them and
mm,
I say, oh, that's really good. I hope it goes really well. But if that's going to be your approach, I just want to let you know that
mm,
if you do come back to me, I'm probably going to ignore all of it. And it has nothing to. I'm not going to be tied down to any of that
mm,
because that's just not how personal brands are created. And and because if I think that the best way to get you attention is something outside of that, that's going to be my recommendation. So I'm probably not the best person for you, right?
mm,
Because this is not my approach. And so um, they generally get it. They generally
mm,
get it, and sometimes it takes a little bit of time for me to get them to be comfortable with posting their radical ideas. Um, and that's the biggest hurdle that I ever have to have. Getting them to do silly things because most of them are like founders and you don't become a CEO by not taking risks. So these are people who kind of um, are already kind of bold people who are not afraid to
yeah.
share their opinion or do things. But I do tend to look for marketing minded CEOs and executives. I'll tell you, there is
Yeah.
one group of people, one industry in particular, that
Yeah.
I have basically. I don't even. I try to unless like it's something really intriguing. I don't even take the calls anymore, and that's anyone from Silicon
Oh,
Valley.
really? Oh,
People,
really?
yeah, people who
What's
are, yeah.
sorry. I was like, I wanted you to finish. I'm sorry for interrupting. Yeah,
No, go
continue.
on. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I know. I was just like, that's really fascinating, because most of, like, I thought all of the FOMO and all the excitement and hype is coming out from that place. But like,
It
I'd love to
is.
see
It
hear. Yeah.
it is. But people who are in that sort of bubble, in that Silicon
Mm,
Valley bubble, tend to that community of people have a very. It's a culture,
mm,
and they have a very. They're very into systems, and they're very into whatever the thing is, and then maybe like few years ago is like, what does Ray Dalio say about how you should run a company? Or they're very right, and they're tied down by their VCs and this and that. It's a whole different culture, but everything is very so for them, this whole concept of like doing something without a strategy is reckless. right? And even though most of them started their companies that way, right? Like
Hmm.
so and so, like there was no solution to this, so they did it, and
Hmm.
no one told them they couldn't, so they, you know, but over time they end up developing this thing, and they're scared. A lot
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
them are just super scared people. Now, I'd love to be proven wrong. I would love to have somebody listening right now who works in Silicon Valley and who's like, it's like, I want to be the showman of Silicon Valley. Um, you know, I guess the closest person would be like Peter Thiel, right? He's like not afraid to say what he, this or that or whatever, but he can sort of afford to, right? Like do whatever he
Hmm.
wants. So a
Yeah.
lot of people who are like in that position of like, I need to get funding, I need to keep my VCs and my board and this and that, and they get really,
Spooked.
shaky,
Hmm.
spooked. So there's not they're actually I find that most people who work in Silicon Valley to be incredibly boring, right?
Wow.
And they're not the type of people that I can help or work with. Oddly
That,
enough,
that's that's
some of this clients are finance people, like people work in finance or like mortgages or and stuff like that. They're not afraid to be
yeah.
bold and so it's interesting.
That is really non-intuitive. Like I thought the opposite would have been true. You know, I think
Yeah,
that like the financiers would be more like system people and more like less bold to try things. And it reminded me of like uh, people in Silicon Valley just going into their systems so deep that they lost the ability to like play, right?
oh
Uh,
yeah, there's no play.
right? Yeah.
They're they're
So
and they're and they're very into automation, right? I mean, everything they're
mm,
building now is basically how helping people automate things. And so it eventually what happens is they're working with me and they're I know I can sense in the back of their head they're
yeah,
beginning to think, how can I automate Justin? Like, why do I need him anymore? And it's I don't mind. I mean, go ahead, try. Like the point is and for a bunch of different types of writing, yeah, you could
mm,
have AI pump it out and like but like I'm not just doing writing. I'm not just
mm,
doing that type of thing. And but like that's where their minds are always at.
yeah.
How can I remove people from my life, which is sad to a
Or
certain extent.
yeah, yeah. I come from the crypto startup scene, and I know from in the past that folks have been so bullish and optimistic about the concept of DAOs, decentralized autonomous organization, which is basically a company where everybody's a
Yes.
robot. It reminds me of that.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. Think about it.
Um,
Like, okay.
yeah. So I want to. There was this earlier. I just realized I wanted to get into. I want to uh, do a big shout out here because I'm meeting with this person like next week. You mentioned one of your friends is uh, McLuhan, son of Marshall McLuhan, and the medium is the message. Is probably the most cited idea in media theory. Does that framing actually influence how you think about your work and how you work with clients?
So one of the reasons why Andrew McLuhan is one of my friends. My advertising um, hero is Howard Gossage, a man named Howard
Hmm.
Luck Gossage. And for listeners right now, if you've never heard of Howard Luck Gossage, I envy you because you now get to discover him for the first time. He is just you, and once you do, you will never think of advertising and marketing the same way again. But one of his
Hmm.
claim to fames is discovering Marshall McLuhan and making Marshall McLuhan famous. So there's this very interesting history here of basically a lot of the techniques I use with my clients and more well known and whatever are the same tactics that Howard Gossage used for this part of his business, where he would take he
Wow.
called it genius scouting, where he would sort of take names like Marshall McLuhan and introduce them to the business world and make them a little bit more, like well known and stuff. So his first person that he did that was Marshall McLuhan, and so Andrew and I bonded on that kind of stuff, and Marshall McLuhan's. And Howard Gossage was obsessed with Marshall McLuhan's philosophy. Actually, I
Hmm.
was just talking about it with somebody here. I happen to have the book right here,
Oh
Understanding
shoot!
Media,
Wow.
which
Yep.
is which is a Bible. It's a prophecy. Every chapter that he talks about there has come true, and the last chapter is about automation. And
Okay, nice.
you're beginning to see everything that he's talking about in there becoming true as well. But for the most part, yes, it deeply influences the way that I work.
Hmm.
In practical levels and philosophical levels, the way I see technology, the way I use AI, the way I tell my clients to use AI. For example, do not use AI for the things that you're bad at. Only use AI
Oh,
for the things that you're good at. Because one of Marshall McLuhan's philosophies is that technology is an extension of yourself. So your car is an extension of your legs. A shirt is an extension of your skin. Your house is an extension of your skin. TV is an extension of the eyes, etc. So we could get into like what AI is an extension of all day long,
hmm.
but the point is whatever it's an extension of, when you use AI for a skill that you're bad at, you're extending the badness. When
We're
you're
amplifying
good
it.
at, you're amplifying the badness, right? When you use it for something that you're really good at, right? So like, could I use AI to organize my schedule and do all of that type of stuff and follow the prompts and stuff? Like, yeah, I could, but you know what? I'm really bad at organizing, period. So I'd rather
Hmm.
have my EA who's been trained in organizing crazy people like me build an AI for me because he knows what he's doing, right?
Hmm.
Whereas
Yeah.
like I'm just going to be tinkering at that all day long. Now, unless you're using the AI to learn a new skill, then that's
Yeah.
fine. But for the most part, so that's just like one example. And the other is when it's interesting, the medium is the message. Also, it is a very important thing to remember with personal branding because we get so caught up in what it is, the message. So the medium of the message, like when you break it down, what it's basically saying is that um, the message, the TV show, the announcement, the text, whatever it is inside of a medium, people think that that's like the most important thing. They think violence on
Hmm.
TV is the main thing. Is violence. It has nothing to do with that. The medium is actually the thing that has the greatest impact on the way we think. And the example of that is, for example, a telephone. Right when the telephone
Hmm.
came out, right, and you and I say called each other, what you and
Hmm.
I say to each other is insignificant. Insignificant. Unless you and I are presidents, right? Like making world decisions. But for the most part, it doesn't matter what you and I say to each other. But the
Yeah.
very fact that you and I can speak instantly, like we're doing now,
Yeah.
completely changes the way we think about communication. It rewires our brains. Which then has a greater mass effect on all sorts of different things. And when you apply that to personal branding, it's very important to remember, first of all, which platform you're using, LinkedIn or whatever, the medium
Yeah.
changes. The medium
Hmm.
will change your message, the way that you should be messaging and stuff like that. But
Hmm.
also to remember that what people are actually paying attention to more than anything is not your words and not what you're saying and not the message, but how you are presenting that. So a lot of people have been staring at this light bulb at the top of my head. And when they see me again, they're going to see that light bulb and they're going to see I'm always wearing, say, overshirt every time they see me, or they're going to like my beard, like everything like that stuff. I'm going to argue is not just as important as your message. I will actually argue that it is more important than your message. Um, and it's the honest, uh, um,
Is it
greeny.
because the anchor?
It's not.
Oh, should.
Uh, it uh, it it's Machiavellian, if you want to put it that way.
Hmm.
It is because when you meet or see somebody for the first time, we are visual creatures, and we will make a
Yeah.
visual. Or if we don't have visual, then your voice we will make, right. And if you say a word, if you say a sentence, it's like, well, I think that this is what we should do, or this is what we should do.
Hmm.
Same thing. Same,
Yeah.
right? Whatever comes afterwards is going to be the same thing, but it's said it in a completely different way, and that is an extremely important thing that you don't hear LinkedIn gurus talking about that, or personal branding people talking about that anymore, because it seems shallow, it seems evil, right? It seems like I'm manipulating, like it's like, well, of course, but we're all manipulating each other all day long anyway, right? And that's
Yeah.
part of my philosophy, which
Conversation.
is, yeah, it's part of my philosophy, which is that because of psychology, we somehow have lost the concept that we do have a public self and a private self. We think
Yeah.
that like we are just
Persona.
one
Yeah.
self, but no, we have a public self and we have a private self. And the great news is you can make your public self whatever you want, and that's your personal brand. That
Yeah.
is, and the only way to build that is in public. The only way to build your personal brand is to start using it in public and with other people. And to me, it's healthier. It's a much healthier society to go about it that way.
Yeah, you remind me of like how musicians, right? Let's say Madonna, that's her pseudonym, that's her public self. She has a real name, but it's not what presented people in the public. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's really interesting. So, oh, sorry,
By the way,
seem that's
Elon Musk too. Elon Musk,
okay.
Branson, Donald Trump. I've heard stories. Donald
Mm.
Trump is a completely different person in private than he is in public.
Oh yeah. Some
Right?
comedians, I
Like
get that secondhand. Yeah,
yeah. So it can be as extreme as Madonna, but it can
yeah,
also be as subtle as Elon Musk, right? And by the way, if
fascinating. Yeah,
if they're the same, you can merge them. I would say P.T. Barnum was probably the same in private that he was in public, right?
mm.
But you're talking about one of the greatest personal brands ever created in the history of the world, P.T. Barnum.
Yeah.
So much so I'd mention his name today, you still know what I'm talking about, right? So it's such an important thing.
You know,
To me,
you're one of the very few people where I've actually align on the use of these personas, public and private. Like, I'd like to get your take. Like, people put public and private personas and make them two separate things. They can, like, you can put a wall between them, but you're saying you could also make them the same and make them appear the same or behave the same. But isn't there a trade-off? Like wouldn't you be more vulnerable as if your public persona is your private at all at the same time?
yeah. So the worst advice ever is be yourself, be authentic. It's like, no, you want a show of authenticity, of course. It's a show, though. No one, honestly, if we acted like ourselves in public, people would run away from us like the plague. Imagine every nasty thought you ever had about somebody. Just
Okay.
what are you going to just air it out there? Every emotional outburst. Maybe you pick your
Yeah.
nose. Maybe you don't wash your
You're
hands
gonna draw.
after you go to
Oh,
the
man.
bathroom. You're going to share all of that information? Give me a break. Authenticity, so you pick and choose these
Mm.
things. All the world's a stage and all of us are merely players in it. It's like improv comedy, right? The thing about improv comedy is that there are rules. And right,
Okay.
yes,
Yeah. It's a discipline. Yeah.
There's still rules to this. Yeah, so I know people whose public persona and private they are just two completely different people. I mean it, like Jekyll and Hyde. They are just completely people. And the funny thing is when they're with you in private, they'll be so nice to you. When they're with you in public, if you're like beneath a certain thing that they need, and you're what they will ignore you in like that, right? And you just kind of you can either say that they're an asshole or you can just understand what they're doing, right? It's up to you to make that decision.
Yeah.
I know people who are like
Trump
that.
comes in mind.
Trump is one of those people. I think and then I know people whose personal brands and public selves and private selves are, I mean, 80%, 85, 90% the same.
Match.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Crazy.
and that's fine, but they're still not sharing everything, and they're still not right. And even with the people who are radically different, there are elements, there are things that are
Mm,
fusing each other. But this is a philosophical conversation. At the end of the day, what I'm concerned about is your public self and what
mm,
we need to do to either get yourself more well known,
yeah.
or fix a problem, or whatever. That's
That's yeah, that's really like thought provoking that you what you just shared. You know, like I wish maybe like in another conversation, like one thing that I've also been exploring, right, is the idea of multiple public personas. Because like someone say Madonna wants to do classical music, she's not going to use Madonna. She's going to create another persona for that, and we might not know. It might be a pseudonym, but like I've seen artists do that in social media, like take on a we never knew there were this other guy. But yeah,
yeah, but
well,
it's usually done. It's done anonymously. It would.
mm,
I think the only person who comes to mind in my lifetime that I can think is Garth Brooks, who had the country
okay,
music thing, and then he also created like a indie rock persona, and he had both at the same time, and I think it didn't work well because
hmm,
you know for the most part, I always say like, oh, people are like, oh, there are 8 things, 9 things, marketing, branding. I always say, in understanding people, I was
yeah,
like, you can make this really simple. People do not, people are always just trying to avoid 2 things. They don't like to be confused, and they don't like to be bored.
huh.
So if you just keep it simple and make it exciting, you will make 90% of your marketing or whatever promotion, publicity endeavors awesome.
Wow,
And of course you could break that down into a lot of different things, but it's really like keep it simple, make it exciting. And it's
yeah,
like I always look at things like somebody's like, oh, I have an announcement to make, this announcement. So I look at it and I'm like, is it simple? Yes. Is it exciting? No. How can we make it more exciting? Is it exciting? Yes.
yeah,
Is it simple? No. How can we make it more simple? Right? Like,
mm,
and sometimes it's just stupid how you can make it exciting.
yeah,
Sometimes the way to make it exciting has absolutely nothing to do with the thing that you're doing. Right. And people just they get caught up so much in like the figuring out the brand essence of something, or like Starbucks. Like, but I always, whenever people are like, well, that's not a good name for my brand or a good logo because that's not with our brand essence. Like brand essence, we're talking about brand essence.
yeah,
What is Starbucks? What the hell does the word Starbucks have to do with coffee?
yeah.
And what the hell does
Especially
a
at the beginning.
two-tailed what does a two-tailed mermaid have to do with coffee? If Starbucks went
I
and
don't
said,
know.
"Hey," in fact, I wrote a post about this. The guy who founded Schultz, he was part of the company Starbucks. He left, started his own company, called it like Cafe something with coffee, high end. It didn't do. It made him. I don't know. It made him money. It didn't do so well, but then he bought Starbucks, and then turned Starbucks into a thing. Because the problem is if
Mm,
like if Starbucks was like, okay, we went going to a brand, are we? Their logo would be like a bean and some sort of name with coffee,
so
right?
generic, so ignorable.
But
Yeah,
because they're Starbucks with a two-tailed mermaid, no one can copy them, right? And so a lot of times I'm like, oh, you want to come up with a name? You want to come up with a brand identity? I have like clients all the time. They're like, hey, you have your light bulb. Can you create something like that for me? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Tell me like 10 objects that are around you right now. They're like, seriously? I'm like, yeah. It's like, blah, 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 like a water bottle. Great. Let's use a water bottle. What the hell does a water bottle have to do with me? Nothing. It has nothing to do with you. But you know what else has nothing to do with you? Your name. Your parents gave
hmm.
you a name,
Yeah, that's
Edward.
true.
Edward.
Yeah,
Did they give it to you because they had some sort of deep spiritual insight into your brand essence? No. You were named after somebody, or you were named after. I mean, there's some religious people believe that that's the case, but the point is like at the end of the day, you make your name something or not.
yeah.
Elon Musk,
You
when he
give it
was 3 years
meaning.
old, was just Elon Musk. Now Elon Musk means it's something, right? So you bring the meaning to whatever it is that you're doing, and by doing that, you make yourself unique. But if you tie yourself down, if I say, well, my name is Justin, So I'm going to be just. And like, but being just and becoming a lawyer would be or a judge would become the absolute worst thing for me in the world. Think
Yeah.
about it that way. Like, why would I do that? So just don't. People get a little bit too crazy about this stuff, you know.
Like that's you can get really caught up with that when I know when I have to like put it out here on the show. Like I actually had a when I studied in university, I studied advertising too. So I'm very familiar with a lot of the concepts that you're sharing, and it's really fun to like talk about them, right? And one of the mistakes that I've made in the beginning was just like, oh man, this exactly what you're saying. Like what the I want the brand to say. I want it to be in the name. It doesn't need to be. You just create that meaning over time. And yeah, like I
Let
remember
them
getting so
decide,
caught on that. Yeah, there you
right?
go.
I mean, Jeff Bezos has that line, which, right? It's like,
Mm,
your brand is what people say about you when you leave the room, which is a
mm.
great line. But if you think about it philosophically, it implies a lot of things. It implies, people forget that what that implies is you had to have been in the fucking room to begin with. And you in order to get people to talk about you after you leave the room, you must have done something in that
Done
room
something. Yes.
to get
Yeah.
something, get them to do it. That's how the brand is made. It's made by you walking into the room, taking out a bucket, filling it up with champagne, and dropping goldfish into it, and then leaving. And then people are going to talk about you. Like it requires. I just made that
Yeah.
up on the spot, right?
Well, no,
But the
no, it's
point
good.
is you need to walk into the room and do something in order for people to talk about you after you leave. It's not just, and so that's where the brand is created by the doing. Now you could
Yeah.
have, now the danger part is like, well, I'm going to plan on what to do when I go in there. And so that's where sometimes yes, sometimes no, sometimes the point is like, it doesn't matter. You could go in there and do that, think like, now they think I'm awesome, but they think you're a loser. Or you could think like, oh, I really did that badly, but they could think you're the most interesting man in the world, right? Like Dale
Mm.
Carnegie says,
You can't control what they see.
Dale Carnegie says that the best way to be get people interested in you is to be more interested than interesting. So
Mm.
yes and no to that, right? Because I guarantee you, Salvador Dali walks into a room, announces that this morning he had two beautiful defecations that look like rhino horns, which he once did, right? And people are gonna talk about that, and they're gonna say the charlatan, this, that, or whatever. But the point is like it's all different types of approaches for all different types of people, depending on what you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with. But the only way to build your personal brand is to use it, to start using it. And the only way to use it is with personal publicity. And ultimately,
Yeah.
you can bog yourself down all you want with your brand guidelines and pillars and philosophy about what you think works. But ultimately, hopefully, you will do something and it will work. And the dopamine effect will just be like, oh, okay, I'll just be that instead, and let yourself go with it. Because
Mm.
the other thing too, I always remind people is if you look at most of the people who are famous for whatever reason they're famous, they're no longer famous for the original thing that they became famous for. Right? It's a
Okay. Yeah.
compound. Fame is a compounding interest effect. Right? And the
Hmm.
more famous you become, the more relevant you become, the more well-known you become, the more opportunities open up, the more doors open up, the greater chance you have of getting lucky. I don't mean sexually. I just mean like in the
Yeah.
casino
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
marketing. And you can, and you don't know. I always tell my clients, like, I don't know what the ROI is, because look where I am now. I have like people,
Mm.
I just got off a call recently with somebody who like wants to form an agency with me. And I have a guy who runs hospitality stuff who wants me to help him build hotels. You think I would never, ever in my life have been this if, but like, let's just say I take that job and I become like a hotel person, right? Like, but that's not what I became famous for originally. right?
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
just got to let yourself kind of go with this and let the people decide why they like you. The easiest way to do it too.
Yeah. Yeah. I really appreciate what how you like take this very um it sounds like simple as a concept, but it's actually very there's so many sides to it that you can get bogged down, right? And so lost in like trying to like get it right and get it perfect. But I like how you boil it down, keep it simple, keep it like exciting, right? I love
I
the
do,
analogy of
I do,
go into a
I
room,
do have,
do something.
I do have a principle. I do have a
Mm,
guideline. I do have a framework, and the framework is very simple. It's
yeah.
showmanship. You need, when I say master the art of personal publicity, and what you need to do is start applying showmanship into everything that you do and everywhere that you
Mhm.
can. And people are like, well, showmanship, I'm not talented. I'm not. No, no, no. Showmanship simply means do whatever everyone else is doing, you do the opposite. So, like, for example, showmanship doesn't have to be exciting. It's only exciting in the sense that it's exciting. What I mean by that is that you take Tiffany's. When Tiffany's became a jewelry company in the 1920s, or
Yeah.
probably earlier than that, I think late 1800s.
Mm.
Every they didn't pick a logo; they picked a
No, they
color.
still don't.
Yeah, they picked
Yeah.
a color,
The
and
green.
literally
Yeah.
the first catalog that went out for Tiffany's was just a blank light blue cover, and that's what they sent out. And eventually, they turned
Mm.
that color into the boxes. They also, in their advertisements, they never put their address.
Well,
If you
okay.
knew, if you knew where Tiffany's was, you knew. If you didn't, you didn't.
Uh,
The other thing that they did was that all the other jewelry stores opened on Sundays because that's when people would be walking around and they'd be able to put the displays out. That's
mm.
when the women would be mostly walking around. They put the display of the jewelry out. Tiffany's closed on Sundays. You could, for religious reasons, no,
Mm.
right? The and all of that is that's showmanship, not exciting showmanship, not razzmatazz, not hey, listen, it's not that like Hollywood showmanship, but it's an act of showmanship. So that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Like, there's no
It's a
formula
peculiar
here.
event.
And if you
Yeah.
want me to, if you need me to break down into a system what showmanship is, then
Yeah.
buddy, you just either let somebody do it for you or let somebody else be the front person, right?
Mm.
Because it's that's where it becomes it's you got it or you don't, as they say in
Mm.
Hollywood. You're either the it girl or you're not, and that's what it is.
Yeah. That's really powerful stuff that you shared. So, we have to like land the plane, so to speak. But like this has been a really fascinating conversation, and I'm really excited to chat deeper in what you talked about with Andrew, like McLuhan next week. If I get to book a time with him, it'll be such a fun conversation too. So I also appreciate the intro there. So how can folks like get in touch with you? Like what's the preferred way of people reaching out to you and like learning more and finding your work?
Sure. There's three main places right now. One of them is LinkedIn. So again, it's what linkedin.com/in/ Justin Oberman. I think by saying slash, I'm aging myself, but it's fine. The other is on Substack. Uh, and on LinkedIn, I have a newsletter called the Anti Guru, where once a week I screenshot a LinkedIn guru trying to sell you something, and I break down what's really going on. Uh,
Oh, that's
and
cool. Yeah.
yeah, and the first day it launched, it got 3,000 subscribers. I think it's up to 5,000 subscribers now. The other place is, and by the way, if anybody wants to know how to break through the algorithm, you create a LinkedIn newsletter because the first newsletter you create gets sent to all of your followers. Anyway, the
Mm.
the second um, place is Substack, oberman.substack.com, where I have a newsletter called Overthinking, um,
Love it.
where I talk about right now I'm on a showmanship series where I'm breaking down showmanship.
Mm,
I also give really fun AI prompts, not prompts, fun ways of using AI in order to stimulate creativity, that I don't see anybody else talking about. Basically, it's how I use AI, like very kind of slop. Um, and the other place is Stan Store. I have some courses and master classes, mostly one of them on the art of personal publicity. But also, I'm going to be launching um, uh, a series of course called Copy Hunter, that will
mm,
teach you how to think and write like a human with in the age of AI without relying on AI. Um, Without relying entirely on AI. It's simpler than people think it is. I think it's a very important thing. Um, so I have a master class coming out on May 19th that people should sign up to, called how to never run out of ideas again without relying on AI.
mm.
And Because if everybody's getting their ideas from AI, I mean, then you don't have any original
Nothing
ideas.
new.
So
Yeah.
yeah. I think that's stan.store/Justin Oberman. And I should have had some sort of special. Uh, if you go there and you see the course, mastering the art of personal publicity, and if it's too much money for you, reach out to me on LinkedIn, DM me, and I'll send you a code so that you can uh, uh, um, get take some money off and help you out.
Wonderful, wonderful stuff. So, Justin, thank you so much for taking the time to like share your insights and we I feel like we learned so much, and I sharpened like a lot of what I've knew instinctively, but never really had a hardened kind of concept around it. So I really like value what you shared today, and yeah, like hopefully, yeah, we'll get to chat more with in the future and with all your clients as well. We'll have them on board. It'll be a
Absolutely.
fun time.
Thank you.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today, and yeah, we'll end the stream now.